Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. I'm actually feeling good, Ted. I'm feeling almost like my normal pre-breast cancer self. So,
Oh, well.
yeah, I'm like really feeling good. Maybe spring is about to sprung. I don't know. We're in the 50s today in DC, so
Oh, nice.
yeah.
Winter
You guys are
storm
getting an
warning for New York City.
That's what I heard.
Yeah. We're expecting some schmutz over the weekend. Yeah.
Ice storm, stuff like that.
Yeah. Severe
But
weather alert.
isn't that what it's supposed to be in New York in February?
Yeah.
Isn't
No, it's totally normal. Between sleet accumulation between 3 and 5 inches and ice. So it'll be like the ice storm, but without the key party. So
fun, good times.
Mhm.
Well, it's fitting since we're going to be talking about Greenland today. So maybe
True.
you're just preparing for our new U.S. territory. You're adjusting to life.
That's right. That's right. Although with climate change, Greenland will become green again.
That's that's probably true.
Make Greenland green again.
Well, according to scientists and what they've discovered in the ice sheets, it is true. Greenland used to be green at some point. So anyway, as you guys can see, we talk about anything and everything on this show, even the occult stuff, taboo stuff. And of course, we do allow for cursing. So if you are not into that, you're tuned into the wrong show. I'm Manila Chan. That's Ted Rall. This is the TMI Show, Ted Manila Information Show. But we do call it the TMI Show, where we give you too much information. We're live Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern. So, guys, please be sure to like and follow this show, especially if you are watching on one of these streaming platforms live. It would help us tremendously if you're watching live and you do hit that subscribe or the follow button, the thumbs up. It really helps the algorithm give us some exposure. So we'd appreciate helping us grow the channel that way. So I already spilled the beans. We have a professor that's going to be joining us from Denmark to talk about this U.S. history in Greenland. And there is a
history.
There is a tremendous amount of history. I talked about this last week on my weekly Friday podcast, and I can't say I uncovered the history. It's been there. It's just no one bothered to talk about it. But now suddenly this past week, they are talking about the history of it. Because, you get to thinking like, well, why does Trump keep insisting on buying Greenland? Why did he send Don Jr. to Greenland?
Maybe he doesn't want him to come back.
I think so. I think because Jared and Ivanka are there.
I mean, I just wonder about. By the way, I think there's a credible case to be. Look, the Israelis say that they're entitled to Palestine because they were there 3,500 years ago. And yeah, they left 2,000 years ago. They were gone, right? I mean, they just were.
Sure.
And that they're like, okay, well, we're back. It reminds me of one time I sublet an apartment, and it was meant to be for several months. And then after like a week, the guy calls me and he goes, well, yeah, my vacation didn't work out, so I'm coming back. I'm like, what do you mean you're coming back? He goes, yeah, you got to get out. I'm like, but I paid. He's like, yeah, I'm coming back. So it's like, that's what the Israelis are like.
You were the tenant.
We're back. Yeah, I know you lived here now, but we're back. So
we're just.
But look, the Danes, in other words, and the Greenlanders are Danes legally. They discovered America, the New World. Leif Erikson, right, the Viking, he was a Dane. He discovered Newfoundland, the New World, Nova Scotia, those places.
North America.
1,000 years ago. That's recent compared to the Israeli claim. So it's like, they should say, listen, you're not invading us. We're invading you. Like you North America is Danish.
I guess there's an argument.
For all of you Danish imperialists, this is my gift to you this Friday.
Wow. Well, there's an argument, it sounds like, to be made. If we're talking way historics, then there you go. All right.
If you really want to go further back, then you have to give it to the Polynesians, because the Polynesians discovered about 4,500 years ago. The Polynesians came here they got into
came to the U.S.
They came to the Americas, from the South Pacific, thousands of miles.
That's crazy.
They dug out canoes on the high seas.
I would argue, and I don't know this for a fact because I haven't looked into it, but I like the finance minister of Greenland. He looks like a First Nations person. He like a Native American, First Nations.
Well, yeah, they're basically Inuit. They are. They're Inuit people. There's not much difference. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's what the native people actually look like, and less like you, Ted. More like me, less like you.
By the way, producer Robbie gets a compliment from the YouTube chat. Great thumbnails on this channel. Producer needs a promotion. I like the thumbnails as well. Just saying.
Promote me, baby. Promote me. I'm here.
We'll give you a promotion.
That sounds good.
We'll get you a raise.
But hey, talking about the Polynesians,
we'll double
and the
your
Danes,
salary.
I'll take
existing salary.
I like it. No, going with this whole claim, I'm going to go away because you have a show to do. What you can do is the Greeks, they really have a much more valid claim than even the Danes do. Because Anatolia was Greek up to 500 years ago, so they could expel the Turks because they were there first and take it all back. So, if we're going to go this way, let's just do that. Don't start from sooner, then going back. It works from 2,000 years ago.
Sooner
500
seems
years
more.
Works.
Yeah, sooner seems more likely. Well, the Ottoman Turks.
We're going to talk modern history.
Yeah, the Ottoman.
Get out of here, Robbie.
Bye. Swoosh. All right.
All right. Let's get into headlines.
All right, let's do it. Looks like Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump are finally going to hang out. Preparations for a meeting between the two leaders are at an advanced stage, according to a top Russian lawmaker. There's no shortage of stuff to talk about, of course. Ukraine. The top of the agenda is brokering a settlement in the 3-year-old war. Trump said that he was going to bring a quick end to the war, so he wants to meet with Putin as quickly as possible to try to make that happen. Putin says he wants any settlement to be part of a larger U.S.-Russia pact on a bunch of global issues, not just Ukraine. And also he says he won't talk to Zelensky directly. Well, I don't think Zelensky will talk to him directly either. Zelensky, meanwhile, wants security guarantees from the U.S. to stop the conflict from flaring up again in the future.
It's illegal, Ted. He can't talk to him. He'll be breaking his own law.
That's true. So it sounds like actually everybody's on the same page here. Everyone wants the war to end. The Ukrainians realize that they're going to have to make territorial concessions. The Russians want territorial concessions. The U.S. and Russia both want there to be a rapprochement or at least a détente between the two countries. So that'll probably happen. Also, they want to talk about nukes. Virtually all of the arms control treaties between the U.S. and Russia have expired, lapsed, or been canceled. New pacts, which could involve China.
Just like Zelensky's term.
True, which is a major. China is, of course, a major nuclear power. Also, is a key challenge for the two largest nuclear powers. It seems clear that both Russia and the U.S. want nuclear disarmament, and China has said that they're willing to do it too. So it looks like stuff will get done there too. The Mideast, the collapse of the Assad regime, which was, of course, a major ally of Russia, has affected Russia, but he's trying to keep his military bases there, and he wants to continue to play a role in the region. Russia has close ties with Iran.
That's not looking good, though, in Syria, just FYI.
Agreed. And there's going to so it might be a possible new U.S.-Iran nuclear deal possible with Russia brokering and serving as intermediary between the U.S. and Iran. So February or March is supposedly when this could happen. Well, it's already February, so it's going to happen within weeks.
Well, remember, the anniversary is coming up. The 3-year anniversary of the start
February
of the conflict.
22nd was the beginning of the Russian invasion in 2022. Yeah, that's right. So it would be great, if they care about symbolism. I wonder if Zelensky can be bothered to, wear proper clothes to this meeting.
No. I'm going to say that his wife took his entire wardrobe budget and went shopping at Hermes and Louis Vuitton, down near Élysée and hanging out with Brigitte Macron, because she went on a fantastic shopping spree not that long ago.
So I heard. Maybe he could. Maybe Zelensky.
She didn't buy him any suits.
Maybe Zelensky can hang out with his fellow sartorial magnate, John Fetterman, who's
yes,
busily saying really disgusting stuff about how great it would be to ethnically cleanse Gaza.
Oh my God.
So
well, they have apparently
gross.
the same wardrobe person, I think. I'm hearing a lot of murmurings about Trump firing, quote unquote, Zelensky. So I feel like the end is nigh for this little man. I think his employ at playing president of Ukraine,
he launched his TV show,
is over. Maybe, I don't know. But I think this gig is up, and that's what I'm hearing. And also with Pam Bondi just recently being sworn in, I think like 48 hours ago as the new attorney general, she's heading up the DOJ. She has just last night began dismantling this DOJ task force, and whose sole job, that this was created in 2022 by Joe Biden, obviously, by his administration. The task force's whole job was to attack Russian oligarchs, Russian business entities, to put sanctions on them, seize their assets. Pam Bondi has begun dismantling that in the last 24 hours. So I think that's a move in the right direction for some sort of brokered agreement, at least between the U.S. and Russia, because, I mean, let's face it, Ukraine they're not really part of the negotiations. They're part of it, but they're not the big dogs in the room. It's Russia and the U.S.
They are the yippy little lap poodle.
That's right. So I think if we look at what Pam Bondi is doing at the lower level, if we're not talking heads of state level, if we're looking at the lower level of what's happening here in Washington, I think that is a major indicator that this little dude is about to get fired by Donald Trump. You're fired. And I think Putin and Trump will have a better relationship this time around, because Trump has already beat those, Putin puppet, whatever, all those stupid tropes. He's beat them, and now he is a lame duck, and he has no fucks given. So when it comes to Putin, I think he's ready to just say, let's be friends. And this could hopefully make this relationship with the US and Russia one that lasts, that's not fake like it was in the 80s under, with Gorbachev and Reagan. Hopefully this is like a real relationship where my son won't have to worry about, when he grows up, about hiding in a nuclear fallout shelter like the kids, in the 50s and 60s did.
Yep. We were talking right before the show about nuclear fallout shelters. In fact, in places like Cincinnati, near where I grew up, and Columbia University, where I attended. Okay, let's move on. President Trump is doubling down on his proposal to throw all the Palestinians out of Gaza. He insisted early yesterday that Israel will give the territory to the U.S. with no military intervention required. The UN and other international bodies would argue that Gaza is an occupied territory and doesn't belong to Israel in the first place, and therefore Israel couldn't hand it over even if they wanted to. Trump then signed an order imposing sanctions against the International Criminal Court, accusing it of illegitimate and baseless actions for issuing that arrest warrant last year against Bibi Netanyahu for war crimes in Gaza. The court president, Judge Tomoko Akane, said such sanctions undermine the ICC's work and put the very existence of the court at stake. Maybe they need to do a GoFundMe or something. The move came just days after Trump discussed turning Gaza into a seaside resort, a Riviera of the Middle East, during his press conference. By the way, I did a cartoon back in November of 2023, sort of depicting Club Med Gaza with a guy in the swimming pool doing a land acknowledgement for, we're swimming in the indigenous land of the Palestinian people. At the time I did the cartoon, like basically, I put it out, nobody cared, and that was it. Now it's like viral. And I guess because of Trump's remarks, but it's just funny because, people are like, I couldn't see this coming. And I'm like, anyone could see this coming. Anyway, after
real estate.
After 15 months of bombardment, nearly 70% of the territory's buildings have been destroyed, 90% of the housing stock, with an estimated $18.5 billion in damage. Gaza's decimated healthcare system is no match for mass starvation and the communicable diseases, including typhus, that are now affecting the remaining population. There's probably as many as 500,000 people dead under the rubble. That's arithmetic, because the pre-war population was 2.3 million. According to the Israelis, they believe that the current population is between 1.7 and 1.8. And it's not like they left, right? They couldn't go anywhere. They were like being shot like fish in a barrel. The current cessation in hostilities, the ceasefire, allows more aid to flow into Gaza, but in reality, that's just theory. Trump has paused funding for USAID, and Israel won't let the one agency that was doing the most work there do any work. That's called UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency. Netanyahu and 80% of Jewish Israelis say that Trump's idea is awesome about ethnic cleansing of Gaza. They're all about it. Much of the rest of the world, however, sees it as inhumane and dangerous. Well, not to mention totally illegal and disgusting. Jordan's King Abdullah II, who meets with Trump on the 11th of this month, said that ethnically cleansing Gaza and throwing Palestinians out into Egypt and Jordan would create a new generation of Palestinian resistance and cause further regional upheaval. Yeah, to say the least. Not to mention his regime would be overthrown. Jordan and Egypt have flatly rejected the idea of taking in Gaza's en masse. Jordan notably absorbed hundreds of thousands of Palestinians after the 1948 Nakba and the 1967 wars. Trump wants the Gulf states to finance Gaza's recovery. Man, he always wants the Mexicans to pay for the wall. He wants the UAE to pay for Israel's destruction of Gaza. But Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE have said, yeah, no, you're going to have to create a Palestinian state first, something that the Netanyahu regime says that it will not agree to. So overall, gross, really gross, really gross. I mean, I think at this point, the UN should be meeting in emergency session and should be talking about overthrowing both the governments of Israel and the United States for brazenly, I'm not even kidding, for brazenly endorsing war crimes and ethnic cleansing. I mean, ethnic cleansing and genocide are the two worst things that a nation state can do under international law. And here you have a head of state more brazenly than any head of state in history is brazenly endorsing it. I mean, if you look at other leaders who pulled this kind of shit, like Milosevic and in Serbia and so on, they lied about it. They claimed they weren't doing it. They at least had the shame of it to say it wasn't happening. In the Rwandan genocide, the Hutus denied that they were slaughtering all the Tutsis. Here, you have the head of state of two major countries, both nuclear powers, going on. These being like, all right. The UN should overthrow these countries. The UN should send in blue helmets and be like, you're gone. You're gone. We're occupying the US. And
neither Israel. Of you two are fit to be leaders of states.
They're not. They're not fit. They're just not.
But for whatever reason, Israel wields tremendous power around the world, and the U.S. obviously, is not the sole hegemonic power, but it's the main hegemonic power right now. Right now, it's on the decline.
Well, in terms of hegemonic, certainly. I mean, what other country is hegemonic? China's not hegemonic.
Not there. It's not there yet. But our power is
Russia's not hegemonic.
Other powers are on the up, we're on the down, but it's not a steep drop, but it's on the drop. But so that's not going to happen. None of these people are going to be overthrown. Not our country. Not we're not going to get a President Vance tomorrow. But it's gross what's happening there. And
well, if our country were overthrown, we wouldn't get a President Vance. We would get like UN occupation regime.
Maybe. Well, I mean, we could do like what our next story is covering. We could do like they did, where
true,
where the former president's like, he wagered his bets wrong, I would say, in the last election cycle, and then he lost and he lost the office. So I don't think Trump's willing to make that bet. I think he likes being a kind of King Trump this time around.
Yeah. Oh, well, clearly. It's also strange that Trump is doing everything by executive order. He has control of Congress and the Supreme Court. Why not propose some bills just for fun? But anyway, Ecuadorians head to the polls on Sunday to pick their next president against a backdrop of surging violence reminiscent of the last election 2 years ago. That was an early vote called by the president at the time, Guillermo Lasso in his attempt to avoid impeachment. Danielle Noboa, the fresh-faced son of a banana magnate, achieved an upset victory
That just cracks me up.
and launched an aggressive crackdown against the drug trafficking gangs terrorizing the country. Throw bananas at them. Less than 2 years later, the 38-year-old president
slip and fall.
wants voters to give him a full 4-year term in office in this weekend's regularly scheduled election. Noboa says he wants to finish what he began, and his clear lead suggests that the voters are probably going to give him what he wants.
I can't help it. I know it's silly, but I think of this in like a Looney Tunes kind of a way. Whenever I hear that Noboa is the son of a banana magnate, I just think of like all the antics in cartoons that you do with bananas, like you squeeze the bananas out and they have like banana peels everywhere and everyone slips and falls. So, like the opposition running against him, you just have them slip and fall when they're going on stage, or you stick bananas into the tailpipes of all the cars and the car tailpipe explodes.
I don't know if bananas work. I was going to say we, but I didn't participate in this, but I did hear the effects of it. Potatoes apparently in the tailpipe can cause like a very impressive explosion. So that some of my classmates did that to some of the teachers in the teachers' parking lot at my high school.
That's real. That can.
I think the shenanigans stopped because one of the cars caught fire when they did that. Yeah. So.
Well, Ecuador, as we know, like to be more serious, used to be. I mean, I'm not kidding you, Ted. In the last decade-ish, used to be one of the safest places in Latin America. I mean, truly. And I know a lot of Ecuadorian journalists, and they have all fled the country if you're in the financial position to do so. This was going down the tubes very quickly, and within the last 10 years has become the most violent country in Latin America, which is amazing for such a small country. I don't understand how it devolved this quickly. It's such a small country. I feel like you can get it under control, but to see it happen so quickly was kind of shocking. And conversely, if you look at El Salvador and Nayib Bukele, the also a young president there in El Salvador, flipping the script and locking everybody up in, like literally just jailing everybody, suddenly has become like this safe place, which is not normally the case for El Salvador when you think of it.
I have to correct myself. In the chat, it's being pointed out that Leif Erikson was actually from Norway. But But I was right about the Greenland connection. He was born in Norway, lived in Iceland, and then moved to Greenland.
Honestly, I don't know.
Which still gives the Danes a claim.
I don't know a lot about my Viking history, so maybe the professor will teach me a thing or two.
Viking history is super interesting. It's not all just raping and pillaging.
I don't know anything about it. Fermented fish.
There's a lot of raping and pillaging. Don't get me wrong, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. All right, let's move on.
I had a cartoon that was never got launched. It was about animals, and it was like, two alligators. One of them was like two alligators talking, and one alligator goes, there's a lot more to us than just biting things and dragging them under the riverbank to rot and then eating them later. And then they're like, not that much more, but a little more. Anyway, Black women in the U.S. died at a rate nearly 3.5 times higher than white women during childbirth in the year 2023, according to some new data. While maternity mortality overall has fallen now below pre-pandemic levels, so that's good, racial gaps have widened. That's bad. The maternal death rate for Hispanic and Asian women fell from 17 to 12 and from 13 to 11 deaths per 100,000 live births, respectively. And the rate for white women fell from 19 to 14.5, but the rate of Black maternal death rose from 49.5 to just above 50. Wow. So, that's a pretty startling differential. I mean, I don't think you have to, you don't have to, obviously the difference has to do with economics, poverty, systemic racism, the legacy of racism in the community. It's like even like white doctors don't necessarily want to work in like, the inner city and Black hospitals. They don't have as much access to healthcare. They don't have access to good insurance.
And there's a lot of like pre-existing conditions that are sometimes hereditary. There's just a myriad of things.
True.
I actually worked on a whole special about this that we never got to air. We didn't get to see it to fruition because, we got taken off air. But there is this whole, there's just a mishmash of a million different things, just truly a million different things as to why this disparity between races and maternal mortality. And it's tragic. I don't know how we solve that other than creating a more fair health system for everybody. So it's not a matter.
Economic system will create a more fair health system.
Well, I agree that as well.
That's little socialism never hurt anyone. President Donald Trump's appearance at Sunday's Super Bowl 59 in New Orleans will go down in history as the first sitting commander-in-chief to attend the NFL's title game, in which the Kansas City Chiefs go up against a unprecedented three-peat against the Philadelphia Eagles. What's not historic is his on-again, off-again, decades-long feud with the NFL and its players since the 80s. While Trump and the NFL seem to be on the same page, finally, the relationship has been rocky. When former San Francisco 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick began a controversial social movement by kneeling during the national anthem before the games, other NFL players followed suit, sparking an outcry from Trump and other right-wingers. Kaepernick said he was protesting racial inequality and the oppression of black people in the U.S. The U.S. Secret Service, responsible for protecting Trump, said in a statement Tuesday that it has staff on the ground and they've been there for days getting ready for his visit. Maybe they'll do a little better than they did at that event in Pennsylvania, where, I don't know, blink and you miss it, but it blows me away. The building that the shooter was walking around on top of, taking shots at the former president and future president at the time, it was full of cops. The cops were inside the building. They were using the building. And it's like, hey, what's that up on the roof? Oh, yeah, just an assassin. Don't worry about that. It's cool. Anyway,
hopefully there have been some changes, right? In the Secret Service.
One would hope. Yeah, one would hope. Trump plans to sit down for an interview with Fox's Brett Baier as part of Fox's pregame programming, which is going to be pre-taped from Florida before the game. Presidents traditionally grant an interview to the network. Biden didn't do it. I remember that. That's broadcasting the football game, though both Trump and Biden were inconsistent about participating. Trump, who is technically a New Yorker but is legally a resident of Florida, has not indicated which team he would like to see win. I have no opinion about this either.
No.
How about you? Do you have a dog in this fight?
No skin in the game. I don't really care.
Are you going to watch? Do you like football?
I do. I usually I love football, but I've had other things on my mind the last year or two, so I've kind of not paid attention. If the Rams don't make it, I'm not there. All I know is the Eagles beat the Rams, so I guess by that relationship, I should root for Kansas City because the Eagles beat my team. So I don't know. Just out of spite. But I do find it really interesting that people attending the Super Bowl, which by the way is the most watched event in the United States, and the price for a 30-second spot at the Super Bowl, Ted, do you know, guess how much?
30 seconds. $8 million.
That's bang on.
Really?
$8 million.
I literally was just guesstimating.
Second spot.
I literally didn't know.
And I mean, it's literally $8 million. And apparently this year we should not expect any controversy. Everybody's kind of, I guess, all the advertisers, the big PR firms, the Leo Burnett's and the what have you, they're all playing it safe, putting out ads for their clients that are going to be non-controversial, not too sexy, not too racy.
Really?
So
what's the thinking there?
I don't know that. So I feel like maybe the advertisers are treading lightly in a brand new Trump administration, and with so much conflict happening in the world, I think they're treading lightly, and I think in other words, for the viewers, I think the viewers are going to be bored because
Yeah, the ads
oddly enough,
are a huge highlight of
the
this
ads
event.
are the highlight. Yeah, which is very strange. So, I think this is going to be kind of a blah Super Bowl. This is third time for Kansas City.
Generally speaking, I mean, look, I don't watch football, but my understanding is that, Super Bowls used to kind of, for a long time, were kind of like they tended to be kind of a boring game. But in recent years, there's been some really exciting ones.
Exciting moments. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I would say in the last 10 years, it's become more exciting. But I think people are getting tired of, they're getting burnt out of seeing Kansas City there. That darn Patrick Mahomes is too good, apparently. But I know the people in Philadelphia are stoked because this is their second time back and they won last time. So they're,
my God, I had a book signing. I had the misfortune of having a book signing scheduled for Super Bowl night when Philly was in the, and I thought, people who go to a Ted Rall book signing, they don't watch football. Wrong. In Philly, they do.
Philly,
in Philly,
it's a huge thing there.
Even if you're a communist, you like football because it's Philly.
It's a football town. Philadelphia sure is a real football town. All right, we have our guest lined up. We have a lot to ask him about. So let's switch gears and get over to our main topic.
Okay, well, so Donald Trump recently brought up the possibility of invading, wait for it, Greenland. Setting up a confrontation with NATO, Donald Trump says that the Danish territory, where the U.S. has a Space Force base already, is essential to American national security. It also has some rare earth minerals, and because of climate change, a potential opening to a new Northwest Passage that might start to be open all year round due to the melting of the polar ice cap, not to mention access to northern Russia, Siberia, and so on. What are the possibilities that America will deploy military action against Greenland? What's the status of the American nuclear facility there? Why has the polar north become strategically important? To discuss all this, we're joined by Kristian H. Nielsen, Distinguished Professor of Mathematics and Science at Aarhus University in Denmark. His recent published work has been focused on citizen science, vaccine controversies, environmental communication and the history of science communication, and research projects focusing on trust and mistrust in scientific expertise, open and responsible research and innovation, and the histories, cultures, and communications of science. He's the author of several books, including Camp Century, The Untold Story of America's Secret Arctic Military Base Under the Greenland Ice, and Exploring Greenland, Cold War Science and Technology on Ice. Professor, thanks for joining us here on the TMI Show.
Thank you very much. I'm truly honored to be here. Thank you.
It's great to have you. So, what do you make, first and foremost, of the old and new American presidents, saber rattling against, a demilitarized territory like Greenland that is governed by a U.S. ally, Denmark?
Yeah, I think like many others, I was surprised, but not overwhelmingly so, because, Donald Trump in his last presidency also announced that he would like to buy Greenland from Denmark, and he made an outright offer saying that it was just a big real estate deal, in fact. So I think, a lot of Danes were expecting this kind of offer and announcement from President Trump, but I think it came as a big surprise that he would also hint at some kind of military invasion, as you said, and that he would back up, his offer to buy Greenland with threats of new economic sanctions against Denmark and Europe.
Yeah, Professor, I think now I can't get into Donald Trump's head. I can only speculate based on his personality style. I feel that perhaps he is actually unaware of the U.S. history of the military nuclear base underneath the Greenland ice sheet, as we showed on the screen just a moment ago, you have a whole book about this. You've spoken on several documentaries about all of this. For this news that might be, brand new information to the viewers that are watching and listening at this moment, can you tell us a little bit about this history, how the U.S. managed to lie basically to an ally, to the Danish government in the late 50s, to get a whole nuclear base underneath the ice, get that going without anybody stopping them?
Yeah, that's a long and complicated story, and I wrote a whole book about it, so please stop me if I'm getting into too long a story about it. But you can say that development during the Cold War actually began with a similar offer from the US government to buy Greenland from Denmark. So right after World War II, where the US took over the military defense of Greenland because of Denmark's being occupied by Nazi Germany, the US Secretary of State, James Byrne, simply offered to buy Greenland from Denmark. He made an offer of $100 million in gold, if I'm not mistaken. But Denmark also at the time said, no, we can't sell Greenland. And this was let's say, the beginning of a new era for Greenland, because it became part of the Danish kingdom, and the old colonial status was being abandoned. So while that happened, Denmark also made a concession to the United States that they could have military presence, that they could continue their military presence in Greenland. And this is when the Thule base, which is now the space station that you referred to, was being built in the early 50s. And around Thule, there was a whole research and development program going on, a military research and development program going on, where the US engineering forces were trying to experiment and try out how do you operate in these on the ice and also inside the ice. And this is when they came up with the idea that maybe you can have a military basis and even very long tunnels under the ice where you could employ railroads or have railroad tracks that could deploy nuclear missiles under the ice. So this is the beginning here was Camp Century that we wrote about, which was a sort of a test base where they tried out whether it was possible. And here you can see an image of Camp Century. It's currently being buried down under the ice cap, about 30 meters down. But at the time in the late 1950s and early 60s, it was an operating base with up to 200 people living all year round under the base. And so this is where they were trying to figure out how do you build in snow, how do you maintain these tunnels under the ice, and also can you have these railroad tracks where you can actually have nuclear missiles moving under the ice, because the idea was that if you have this missile system under the ice, then it would be hidden from the Soviet Union and they could not see it, and it would also be close to the Soviet Union, so you could actually respond to any nuclear attack from the Soviet Union quite rapidly.
And they'd move around, so even if they thought they knew where they were at some point, they could be moved, right? So they'd be harder to target.
Exactly. The idea was to have to cover an enormous area in northern Greenland. I can't remember how many square miles, but up to 3,000 miles of tunnels with 600 different missile ranges where you could fire missiles from. They never came that far because, I mean, one of the lessons they learned from Camp Century is that it's very hard to maintain tunnels under the ice, because one of the things about the ice cap is it's like a slowly moving liquid, in fact, right? It's not stable. You think, okay, the ice cap is just sitting on top of Greenland, but in fact, it's moving from the middle of Greenland and towards the ocean. So it requires a lot of work to maintain these tunnels because they're all the time, in the danger of collapsing. In fact, this is one of the things they learned, and that's part of the reason why they gave it up. They also found out that Denmark at the time, I mean, even though we secretly as you also hinted, we secretly allowed the US, or the Danish government secretly allowed the US to have nuclear weapons at Thule Air Base. The Danes proved out to be a little bit more reluctant when it came to Camp Century, and actually tried to get the Americans to build the base elsewhere, or to at least minimize the military implications of the base.
Yeah, that dream of moving the nuclear weapons around it has not died, right? During the 1980s, the Reagan administration had an idea of putting American nuclear weapons on trucks and driving them around the United States so that the Soviets wouldn't be able to target them. Manila, you were on mute before.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to be clear. As far as Camp Century is concerned, did the Danish government know that the U.S. was planning to do that? Because I was under the impression that the U.S., under the guise of scientific exploration, that this is what they told the Danish government. And I was under the impression that maybe the Danish government was unaware that there would be secret nukes underneath the ice.
Yes, no, you're right. I mean, the Danish government, well, first of all, the Danish government didn't approve of Camp Century. So there was an agreement that the Danish government had to approve before activities outside Thule Air Base was being conducted by the US military. And they didn't actually approve of Camp Century, but they had to. They were more or less being forced to accept that, okay, this is what the US wants to go ahead with. And then you're quite right that they didn't know about the full scale of the plans behind Camp Century. At the time, it was known as Project Iceworm. So Iceworms was a nickname for the people who worked in Camp Century, they're digging out into the ice. And Iceworm was also the secret code name for this large-scale operation of having these nuclear missiles under the ice. And the Danish government was unaware for a long at the time. They suspected there was this thing about Camp Century that it was powered by a nuclear reactor.
Yes.
So
how did the U.S. sneak around? I'm assuming it's just because the technology wasn't that great, and it's in a remote location, and the Danish government didn't send any representatives up there to look at what they were doing. I mean, is that basically how the U.S. got away with, skullduggery on sovereign territory that is not theirs?
Yeah, partly. I think it was also a very clever communication strategy because, as you say, they promoted Camp Century as a scientific camp, right? They said, okay, we have this technology, we have the skills and the knowledge, and now we're going to explore how it is to live under the ice, basically, right? So they were giving all kinds of projections about, this is the first step to outer space. If we can live under the ice, then certainly we can also have a base on the moon, and we can do other things. And maybe in the future, we'll even have cities under the ice because that's, we're protected from whatever falls down.
What did Denmark get? What was Denmark getting out of this? Just a rental, or what was in it for them?
Good relations, I think. Good relations with the US. I mean, Denmark at the time was, very much like today. We're in a strange situation where we, on the one hand, have to, make sure that this is that Danish sovereignty is respected, and Denmark keeps on a good footing with the Greenlanders, and accept that that there is a common understanding on how we what we do in this territory. But on the other hand, we have to accept that the US is simply just the major force, and they're also one of the reasons why we're still under kind of a US protection in some ways. And this is the reason why we accept military presence to some degree in Greenland.
Have you been to that base, by the way?
Sorry?
Have you been to the base?
No, I haven't. And it's, as I said now, it was abandoned in the late 1960s. This is when they found out that, it's very expensive to have this base, and they also gave up on the full-scale Project Iceworm, because they wanted it was simply considered too expensive, and also there was an army and a navy nuclear missile program already, so it was considered that it was not necessary. So they gave it up, and they took out the nuclear reactor, but they left most of the rest of the base under the ice. So what has happened since is that it's simply sort of been covered in more and more ice. You know, there's continually new snow falling, and it moves down into the ice, so to speak. So now it's 30 or 40 meters below the surface of the ice. This is what you showed one big image of a radar where you can kind of do radar signals down into the ice, so you can find out where it's located now. So it's essentially just buried under the ice.
It's so crazy when you think. I mean, we're looking at old images that were real from underneath Camp Century, and it looks almost like this, you know, B movie, 1960s B movie, science fiction. But this is real images and real video that we're looking at, because ironically, as much as it was a secret from the Danish government, the US allowed a film crew to go with them underneath the ice. So I take it that, I guess 60 years ago, this video footage did not make it to Copenhagen for them to see.
No. Well, you're not. Actually, it did make it to Copenhagen, but so it's a very hard to understand, because the Camp Century was public in many ways, but of course only the scientific aspects of Camp Century was so it was promoted as a scientific base, and it was also.
So there was real science happening there.
There were real science. I mean, it was a military research and development. So it's. And one of the things they did in Camp Century, which continues up until today, is ice core research, right? So at Camp Century, they dug the first ice core to the bottom of the ice cap, about 1,500 meters, 1,600 meters deep into the ice. And now we think ice core research is important, because we can find out about the past climates, and it can inform us about, you know, what happens when the ice cap melts, and you can get a lot of climate information. But at the time, ice core research was really about finding out how the ice moves, you know, what happens when the ice is gradually flowing from the middle of Greenland, and what does that mean when we need to construct military bases. So it was really a military research project that now has become sort of a climate research project. And all of this footage, I mean, well, not all of it, but a lot of this footage was actually out. I think Walter Cronkite, the famous American journalist from, what's it called, 20th Century TV show?
CBS.
CBS, exactly. He went to Camp Century and made a documentary or a show there. And again, he was only telling about the research and development that was going on, and not about the hidden plans for any missile deployment under the ice.
So the U.S. Space Force, is that based on the same site, or is it adjacent, or is it in a different place entirely?
It's about, let me see, it's 220 kilometers. What does that translate into?
It's about 150 miles, maybe.
Yes, something like that, east of Thule Air Base. So if you Thule Air Base is on the coast in northwestern Greenland, and if you drive 200 meters east on the ice cap, then you would come to Camp Century. Mm-hmm. And so the Danish government suspected that there might be, you know, grander plans behind Camp Century. And what we found out after we published our book, a Dane stepped forward, stood out and said, you know, I've been a secret agent at Camp Century. So this was a surprise to us, because we never found any clue of any agent in the archives. But he has all the documentation, and I think his story is correct. So the Danish Foreign Ministry dispatched this agent to Camp Century. I mean, the Americans knew he was acting on behalf of the Danish government. They didn't quite know why he was there, but he was there to observe. He was simply there to see.
Intelligence?
Kind of an intelligence against our allies. It was kind of a funny story, but he went there and he didn't find out anything really, but he was trying to see if he could get some more knowledge about what was really going on at Camp Century.
And well, I imagine the Danish government won't be as trustful of the U.S. this time as trusting, especially with Donald Trump's pronouncements of, saying wild things like buying it or military takeover of it. And you're hearing a lot of, there's a lot of talk as well of the people in Greenland looking for more autonomy and perhaps sovereignty themselves to break away from Denmark. But if that were to happen, I feel like that would put Greenland more at risk geostrategically, given the location, the physical location of Greenland, the proximity to Russia. So much interest in the polar ice caps area right now, with like the Chinese looking to build new trade routes through the ice. What do you think for Greenland's future? Is it safer for them to stay with Denmark or to break away, or how do you view that?
Yeah, much safer to stay with Denmark, I would think. I think Greenland is a very vulnerable nation. It has only 55,000 or 57,000 inhabitants, and
wow.
the area is huge. Mm-hmm. And the Greenland administration is very vulnerable, I think, in many ways. You have to run an entire country with just 57,000 people. That's very hard, and they don't have the economy to do so. So I think they will be very vulnerable if they actually broke free from Denmark and became entirely independent. But I think this is also what's different now in the situation today compared to the situation when Camp Century happened, because at the time nobody really asked the Greenlanders about what they thought. This is part of the reason why they don't like Denmark so much now, because they thought we were doing a lot of things over their heads, so to speak. We didn't involve them in any decisions around this nuclear reactor or Thule Air Base or anything like that. It was a decision made by Denmark in Copenhagen. So now we have a situation where we really need to involve the Greenlanders much more. And it's clear that there are some bad feelings, let's say, involved from this post-colonial situation where Denmark simply acted on behalf of Greenland and didn't care too much about involving the Greenlanders. So I think it's a very vulnerable situation right now, and Greenland is having an election on March 11th, and again it's a very delicate situation with not a lot of people going to vote, you just need to to change the opinions of very few people if the election is going to fall out in another way. So. Yeah, it's a very delicate and vulnerable situation right now, I would say.
Yeah, I'm curious how regular citizens in Denmark are viewing Donald Trump's rhetoric towards Greenland, towards Denmark. Do they find it odd? How do they read what the U.S. president is saying?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think they find it odd. When Donald Trump in his earlier presidency announced that he would like to buy Greenland, I think the Danish Prime Minister said that's an extraordinary and strange proposal.
Although it's not unprecedented, right? I mean,
no, it's not unprecedented.
Denmark did sell the Virgin Islands too.
Exactly. And yes, and as I said, just after World War II, there was another offer. And if you go back to the 19th century, when the US bought Alaska from the Russian Empire, they were also considering to buy Greenland from Denmark at the time. So it's not unprecedented. But I just think that we're in a different situation. I think a lot of Danes have a hard time really in finding out what does. And maybe you also, it's also difficult for you Americans to find out what does Donald Trump really want. I mean,
That's true.
Is it all rhetoric, or is it also going to be real policy? That's.
I mean, by the way, what does Denmark? I mean, obviously there's a national pride and a historical interest in all this, but I mean, what does Denmark get out of its? What advantage does it get from having Greenland?
First of all, I think Denmark gets a larger role internationally. Right, so Denmark becomes more important internationally in international relations, and particularly discussions around foreign policy issues, security issues, and so on. And we have a greater say in NATO because of Greenland. During the Cold War, they talked about, or in Denmark, we talked about the Greenland card, so we could play the Greenland card, and we can get sort of a larger influence in NATO, and maybe also the US and NATO would not expect us to live up to this full commitment of 2% of the national budget allocated to military defense. So that's part of it, but I think there's also a historical connection. There's some historical sentimentality, if you like, or historical relations between Denmark and Greenland. So Denmark has, Greenland has been a colony of Denmark since 1721. And since that time, there's been a lot of Danish people living in Greenland and Greenlandic people living in Denmark. There's been a lot of marriages and families built up between Danes and Greenlanders. So there is a kind of a family relationship between Denmark and Greenland that goes a long way back. And I think maybe the Greenlanders, they're more, they feel like the teenager, you can say, that is sort of trying to break free and would like not to have this this parent from Denmark looking at them. But I think, there are historical relations which are both good but also strained, you can say.
I'm curious, Professor, what is the indigenous population of Greenland? Are they ethnically more Inuit, or are they Caucasian?
No, they are ethnically Inuit. So they are connected to the people that also live in North Canada and Alaska, and they came from Eurasia through Siberia at one point. And then there's the Caucasian part of the Greenland. They are basically Scandinavians, right? So the first Scandinavians to come to Greenland was actually the Vikings in the around 1000. They didn't stay there. They came back because the climate changed. But then the Scandinavians came back, as I said, in 1721 from Norway and Iceland, and Norway at the time was a part of Denmark. So, yeah, that's the relationships, and at the time Denmark in effect, as I said, colonized Greenland.
This is a fascinating background. I think, for speaking for the Americans that are watching or listening, I think we're getting a crash course on the history of Greenland, as well as the relationship with Denmark and the US, and the interest in this chunk of land, and why, this geostrategic importance for so many countries. And for me personally, when I think, if the US wants it, or if something like that happens, I think that could create major conflict between the United States and Russia. I mean, to inflame, already existing tensions, I think this would make it worse. I think this could also choke off business ties between North America and China going through the northern route.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think for me, it's best that Greenland stay Denmark.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think also a lot of Greenlanders agree. I mean, despite the fact that there is also a lot of dissatisfaction with and a lot of even hatred between Greenlanders and the Danish people. But I think a lot of Greenlanders would also agree. But as I said, it's a very delicate and vulnerable situation because there are so few people that need to change their minds, right? And it remains to see whether we can keep this delicate balance. And I think there's also a lot of issues going on because the whole of the Arctic region is a special region where indigenous people are. They have a hard time in many places, but there's also the Arctic Council, which has operated as a kind of place where they could meet and get their voices heard. But the Arctic Council is shut down because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, because Russia is one of the main players in the Arctic Council. So there's a lot of things that are sort of off balance, and I think it can tip in either direction at the moment.
Yeah, very tenuous situation right now.
Exactly,
Professor, you have so much knowledge. I would love it if you come back. I think Ted agrees if you would come back on our show another time.
100%.
I'm curious to hear this other work that you're working in about, citizen science, vaccine controversies, the environment, mistrust in science. And I think it's at its highest levels ever in modern history that people mistrust science. I would love to talk to you about that and your new work another time.
That would be great. Thank you.
This is fantastic. Thank you so much for being with us. Of course, I'm going to put your book back up here. It's called Camp Century, The Untold Story of America's Secret Arctic Military Base Under the Greenland Ice, as well as this one, Exploring Greenland, Cold War Science and Technology on Ice. Professor Kristian Nielsen, H. Nielsen, in case I feel like there are many others, Kristian Nielsen, so you have to put the H.
Exactly.
Nielsen, thank you so much. We hope to have you back again soon. Thank you.
Thank
you very much. It was a pleasure being here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye.
Oh, there's so much I love talking to professors.
Me too.
Yeah, it's really nice to have, people that have made learning and academia their life's work. And they allow us to pick their brains, people too lazy like me to get PhDs or something. So I appreciate that they open up their brains for us. Anyway, guys, that's going to do it for us. I hope you guys found that interesting because I'm fascinated, I guess, by Greenland and the Nordic regions now because I would say, the Nordic countries joining NATO, right, Ted? Like the last 2 years.
That's true.
And now Trump talking about Greenland. I've really never, the expanse of my knowledge was IKEA.
Well, yeah.
So that was it. So
All
I'm like really into this right now because it's something brand new to me. So like, who knew all the Nordic Viking stuff?
Well, I suppose, this whole current controversy is probably the biggest argument that I've ever heard in favor of militarism. Greenland was famously a demilitarized place, right? That didn't have its own standing army, famously. Yeah. And, people like me have always pointed to it as like, look, they can do it. How come we can't do it? And now, ironically, the U.S. is breathing down their neck and threatening to invade them. So maybe they're probably thinking, maybe we do need an army.
There's like 50,000 people there. There's more people than that in my city right at this very moment. I think there's that many people.
I grew up in
your
Kettering,
building,
Ohio. The population was 70,000 people. It's a suburb of Dayton. Yeah.
Yeah, there's more people than that in the suburb I grew up in Whittier, California. There's a lot more people in Whittier than there are in the whole of Greenland. That's crazy.
It is crazy. It is crazy.
55,000 people? You wouldn't even have enough people for military.
And look, it's such an afterthought. Basically for Americans, the most that they ever know is like as kids, they learn that lore about Iceland versus Greenland, and how Iceland is actually the greener one, and Greenland is actually the icier one, and that's sort of true. There's some truth to that lore, but it's not 100%. It's more complicated than that. And anyway, but that's about it. Then everybody, Iceland and Greenland are kind of like not on the map really for most Americans. I mean, not that we're very good at foreign affairs anyway. Even though we want to run the whole world, we don't want to know anything about the world that we want to run. But yeah, so this controversy
is Iceland.
So weird. Yeah, you're going off.
I'm going to Iceland next month. So I'm curious. I'm going to be
reporting from the front lines of the war.
Yeah, it'll be the polar war by then, and I'll be there a month from now. Like
with the
literally
polar bear soldiers, the really cute polar bear soldiers.
Well, no, they will eat me. Like I wouldn't be
but
afraid
it'll be
of
cute while they're
polar bears misfiring. Like that's a whole threat on its own because of lack of opposable thumbs. But I'd be more scared of the teeth than them misfiring their firearms. So the claws and teeth, man, like no thanks. But yeah, I'm gonna go pick some brains of some Icelandics. What are they?
Icelander. I think Icelanders. Yeah, Icelandic is the language.
Okay, Icelanders, and go eat some fermented shark and some
hang out in Reykjavik.
I'm gonna go hang out in Reykjavik and hope I don't slip.
The
and fall
nightlife is supposed to be fantastic, so.
I don't do nightlife, Ted. I'm ready to go. I want to go look at some giant icebergs. I want to go look at. I want to see the fjords.
Mm-hmm.
Want to see some.
I'm sure you will do those things.
All these weird things in the Northern Lights. It's one of these bucket list trips. I'm not going to be out late, Ted. I got old people coming with me.
Well, if you're going to see the Northern Lights, you have to be out late. But anyway,
I know, but that's not out partying. It's one thing to be, like in a tour group, not partying, but that's what we'll be doing. And I'm gonna ask the Icelanders if they want to be a part of America. I'm gonna plant a U.S. flag. I won't bother them.
Claim it for America. Claim it for Trump.
am. I'm going to go there to Reykjavik and plant an American flag and say, I claim this territory now for the United States of Trump.
All right.
All right, guys, that's going to do it for us. Thank you for staying with us this Friday. Have a wonderful weekend. We will be back Monday. Never short of news. I mean,
no,
just who knows? Who knows? Maybe by Monday, I won't need to, do the Schengen visa thing and like let them know because they're applying a new thing. I don't know if you know, Ted.
I know it's really annoying.
I forget what it's called, like Eurotrap or something. I don't know what it's called.
Yeah.
I think they're supposed to start that like this month. So I need to go do that. All right, guys. Thank you for tuning in. We will see you. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe button, whatever platform you're on. I will be back myself at 2 p.m. On my weekly Friday podcast. And Ted, Scott
Stantis and I are going to be doing the DMZ America podcast tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Eastern time.
Sweet.
7 a.m. Pacific time. So
sweet. I'll be back here 2 p.m. See you guys on the Manila channel. Adios, amigos. Thank you.
Bye.